on the internal TVs at Carondelet Village. So any of the seniors who are maybe not super comfortable with Zoom or the computer, they can simply turn on their TVs and watch it and join us through the televisions at Carondelet Village as well. So with that, we're gonna just formally welcome you, Erin, on behalf of the Sisters of St. Joseph and Consociates and the Carondelet Village community and Lumen Christi Social Justice Committee. We are just so excited that you have accepted our invitation. We do these circle conversations with any candidate on the ballot. And Erin, thank you for accepting our invitation. And I'm going to start with the first question, and it's an open mic, it's Zoom. We've left the microphones open so anyone can ask a question, but I'll just start off. Erin, for those who might not know you, help us to get to know you a little bit. What would you like to share about yourself, and why are you running for office in the Senate this time?
Thank you, Marty and Joan, of course, for, carrying our sign, but for friendship and being conspirators in our future together. I am delighted to be with the community again, and believe that we are in a period of time that is calling me and calling all of us to bring our very best selves to the political square. And I was raised in a family, a big Irish family that talked about politics all of the time. When we got together at my grandmother's house, the adults played cards, and I usually stayed inside with them rather than run outside with my cousins because I loved listening to them talk. And they inevitably got to the topic of politics. And I continue to believe, as I was raised, that it is a powerful and near sacred tool when used to advance the well-being of people, to improve our lives and to build our future. And the experience that we're sharing right now in America is calling for not only our best selves, but a sacred embrace of the foundation of our democracy, which we also share with the church, which is about autonomy and human dignity. And I don't always talk about that in political spaces, but it's something I'm raised with. I'm raised as a Catholic. The social justice teachings of Catholicism course through me and drive me in my work. And so it always means a lot to me to come back to the community and to be able to be a part of the community, because it continues to fuel me and sometimes restore me when I am feeling low. And so I'm grateful for the time that we have together today. I am a registered nurse. I teach at St. Kate's. I'm an adjunct faculty member there in the School of Nursing and teach in the Doctor of Nursing practice. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. I began practicing nursing back in 1985. So I've been at this for a long time. Ran for office in 2005 and 6, was elected to the Minnesota House in 2006 after I took care of my mom at the end of her life. And while she had really good healthcare coverage, she was diagnosed with a very serious lung cancer and lived for about 11 months after her diagnosis and struggled to get the care that she needed, even though she had good coverage because the insurance company tried to deny it. And her sisters said to me at her funeral, "You should do something about that." And my something was running. I got myself elected, even though I wasn't quite sure about what I was doing, which, is an important lesson for all of us. Who think about running one day. And if there's anybody in this group that wants to run for office, I want to be a part of that conversation with you, because we need our very best people in public office. I served for 12 years in the Minnesota House. 12 years working for the people of Minnesota, 12 years spending my time all over the state, curious, wanting to build relationship, wanting to build connection, wanting to pull us closer together. Ran for governor in 2018, had the most transformative experience that taught me that more is possible when we organize, when we lead with hope and with joy. And after a period of time healing up from that loss, which is another form of grief, and really reflecting on what I'd experienced and what I learned, made the decision that I wasn't done with politics. And if I had an opportunity to run for office again, that I would. And it took me a long time to make the decision to run for the Minnesota Senate. For a long time, I didn't think this was something I would do. But I believe deeply in what's possible. I think it is important that we work together to restore people's faith, not only in the political instruments of our democracy, but in the notion that we are self-governing and together we will govern and build our future. There aren't a lot of voices that are driving in that direction right now. And we, with each election cycle, are seeing a further erosion of the political square as we divide against one another. And really no bottom to the negativity and assaults that we are seeing hurled at people right now, people who live among us, with us, who are our community, our family, our friends and neighbors. And I believe that we can counter that with a hopeful, inclusive politics. And when we do that, we can achieve solutions to the problems that we face, whether it is racial justice, a healthcare system that actually delivers care, a path to planetary health. The hard issues that we face are the ones that I want to be a part of driving solutions, and I want to do that work with the people of Minnesota. So all of that is to say, I am very intentional and very purposeful in building a different kind of politics that includes all of us, that is for us and about us. Because with that, I believe we can build a bright and inclusive future for everybody and the people of Minnesota. And we have 33 days left. I've already voted. I don't know about you. I couldn't wait. But I am so excited for the opportunity, knock on wood, to represent the people in St. Paul and to go back to work for the people of Minnesota, doing the work that I believe we can do together. And I'm so glad you invited me today. Thank you.
Great. Well, in the format and in the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph, these are what we call circle conversations. They're meant to be a conversation. We're trying this on Zoom, and you have an open mic. We just encourage you to wave your hand physically or use the raise your hand button in the Zoom. For those watching on your TVs, we apologize we don't have that kind of interaction, but hopefully you'll get to learn a little bit more about our candidate, Erin Murphy, today. And who would like to ask the first question? And I know we've had a couple of new people join us on the call as well. So Ashley, I see you have a question there. Go ahead.
I do. Erin, if elected, how do you see your work in the Senate continuing your work that you started in the House?
Thank you for the question, Ashley. It's a good one. The Senate caucus is a different institution than is the House. And I have been reminded of that. And I need to understand and enter that body with curiosity, knowing that it is a different body, it's a smaller body. They have different institutional perspective. But the years that I served and the reflection over the last couple of years has brought me to the place of a real devotion to the people of Minnesota. And I hope that that devotion and attachment to the people is something that's welcome in the Senate. And if not, I hope it's something that people embrace with me. When I was first elected, the experience that you have is I had, and many candidates have now shared this with me. You are out talking with the people, and it's a little hard right now because we're mostly talking via Zoom. But in my first race, I door knocked the district that I represented 2 times through. I did countless events. I was with the people all of the time. I got a very clear perspective of what it was that they were seeking 12 years ago. I made a commitment to fight for those things. I got elected. I went into the Capitol, into the caucus, and there is like a curtain that gets drawn behind the caucus because it's a closed group. And you can become disconnected from the very work that brought you into, or the very people that brought you in. I don't want that to happen again. And I'm very oriented around how to make the work that's happening inside the Capitol alive outside the Capitol, because I know the power of the office that I seek rests with the people. And we are more powerful when more of us are engaged. So I intend my experience in the Senate to be rooted in the work of Minnesotans. I am excited to get back out on the road again because I know that the success that we have in this Senate district is in deep relationship with what is happening in different parts of the state. And if we're to thrive, we need them to thrive. And if we believe what I believe, which is we care about each other, then we have a stake in the lives of everybody. And I know that not everybody can come to the Capitol, and the relationship that I have with Minnesotans shouldn't be passive. It should be active. And so I will be working to build out the tools that we use in campaigns and bring them right over into the work of governing, so that I am not just getting emails from people about this is what I want you to do, but we're actually having an ongoing conversation outside of the Capitol and in the community. Because I know I'll be a stronger representative of the interests of the people, and our democracy will be stronger when more of us are engaged in it.
Anyone else have a question for Erin? Well, I'm going to jump in with another. Oh, Linda,
Margaret.
do you have a question there?
Margaret George.
Okay.
Margaret,
Margaret
question.
George.
Go ahead, Margaret. I don't see you, but go ahead.
I'm unplugged. I mean,
Is Margaret George muted?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm good. So Erin, could you sort of comment, what, assuming you get elected in the fall, what would be your main topics that you would want to work on in your first year?
So I learned over the years that I served that the issues are really interconnected. I want to make sure that everyone can live a full and happy life. So when I think about that, that is healthcare, that is a safe place to live, that is a job that supports you and your family and your life. It means equity in all that we do. It means making sure that we live in a planet that supports life. You can't really tease them out. I don't know where I'll end up sitting on which committees. I hope I am able to do some work on healthcare. I want to continue to work on the issues of democracy. We're going to have a budget deficit because we certainly know because of the impact of the pandemic on the lives of people and on our economy. In 2008, the second term of my tenure in the House, we entered into the Great Recession. And we continued to wrestle with a budget and deficits until we finally balanced the budget by raising taxes in 2013. I was the majority leader when we did that. We did that in partnership with Governor Mark Dayton. And it taught me that with the budget deficit, if we think we can remedy the deficit by making cuts to the budget alone, that we will continue to experience deficits, and we will put cold water on any economic growth that is happening. We need to kickstart the economy, and I think it will require some investment. And as I have been saying to people, if there are Minnesotans that are continuing to live in tents, we can't cut the budget. If there are Minnesotans who aren't getting health care, we can't cut the budget. Like, we have to tend to the human needs of people. And there's a lot of activity within that state's budget that supports that work. So I'm going to have a big voice in the budget setting and in the process in building support for a budget that supports the lives of Minnesotans. I am certain that I will continue to be involved in healthcare. But in this next chapter for me, I am very interested in attacking the structural problems that make it difficult for us to make progress, both in the political square and in our government. So I'm going to be busy with a pretty audacious agenda in my mind, but I'm also prepared to do that level of work because I've been at this now for a long time.
Anise, thanks for putting a question in the chat. We have some people on television watching who don't see the chat. Would you be willing to ask your question live?
Yes, I'm willing to ask my question live. Thank you, Marty. Hello, Erin. there is such a big divide between the voters of our state. I am just so nervous about what could happen as a result of this general election. But aside from that, how does one even begin to do what you're talking about when there is such a big division between those who live in certain parts of the state and those who live in the metropolitan areas? And I know if you don't get an answer, and if I don't get an answer, I understand because I wouldn't know how to begin to deal with that. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about. And I want to preface my answer by saying that I've had the really beautiful opportunity to spend time with Minnesotans all over the state. And while it is not 100% the case that we share common values, it is the case that more of the people that I have spent time with, and it's not just Democrats, and I've been in deep rural parts of the state, in our regional centers. I've been luckily everywhere. People want the same things. They want a safe place to live that they can call their home. They want to know the place that they live has a fighting chance, that they're not getting left behind. People want health care, a good school for their kids, a clean environment. Those common values are where we need to continue to go. And that's what I hear from Minnesotans. They want that, right? When we hear people say, why can't you just find solutions? Why can't you just, to the politicians, to the elected officials, why can't you find a path forward? I think it is coming from that place of how can this be so difficult when more of us share common values than not? But there's also this other layer that we're seeing right now because we're at the height of the election where elected leaders, political leaders use our fears and identify those fears by region or by race or by ethnicity and launch those into the political square in a way to try and divide us. And that makes it much harder for us to get back to that common place because now instead of talking about how are we going to make sure everybody has a safe place to live, we're talking about Ilhan Omar and what she means to us and riot and destruction, right? And it makes it drives us to a place of division rather than unity. And so I know that I can go to the Capitol and build relationships with Republicans, and that should be the baseline of anybody's expectation for somebody who's getting elected. At St. Kate's, when I got my master's degree in St. Kate's in organizational leadership, we were taught 5 leadership practices, one of them being modeling the way. And it should be the case that you expect from me, I should be modeling the kind of behavior that I'm talking about. Like you should see from me the kind of leadership that I'm describing, and I should be able to direct that and use my voice in conflict with the people who don't agree with me, but in a way that still makes you feel proud. So not tear down the person, but, you know, debate the idea, but I think that's right. But it is the part that I am most struggling with, which is the politically easy tool both Democrats and Republicans use to say, you know, we're getting left behind because of those people, whether it is the people who live in the city, or it is the people who have brown skin or black skin, or the indigenous people. There's always a them that is in the way of me getting where I want to go. And that's the bad habit that we have to break in our politics. And I want to be a part of breaking that habit with the Democrats because it doesn't serve us. And what I saw in the governor's race is when we instead talk about what is possible together, what's powerful in us, like it is such an attractive tool and it brings people together in a powerful way. That's alive and well in us. We just have to trust it more than we trust the powerful tool of fear and division. And I hope I can bring life to that.
That's a very positive and upbeat a set of remarks. Have you in your political career ever run across someone who is so much of a stonewall that you've never been able to break through with sharing common values? I'm just curious.
I have.
Okay.
I have both with fellow electeds, and I have with people on the street. Like I remember being in a parade in Gilbert, Minnesota, and a person turned their back on me because I was from St. Paul. I didn't even get a chance. So yeah, it exists. It exists both in the people who are elected, although it's not that blunt, and it certainly exists in people, which makes it a hard problem, right? It doesn't. It's just not a message that we're hearing. It's a message that is working because people feel it, and
Mhm.
that's what we have to change.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your efforts and for taking all the tough times along with the good ones.
Well, thanks for saying so. I love this work, so I'm very happy for the opportunity. Knock on wood.
So who else has a question? And I'm also going to nudge some of the St. Kate students online. Don't be bashful. Joan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm on my phone. I'm not sure what happened here. We lost internet service. But yes, Erin, I don't know what I missed, but I'm wondering for a very long time, the Equal Rights Amendment has been an important issue for me. Your predecessor, Senator Dick Cohens, led the effort in the Senate to get the ERA included in our Minnesota Constitution. He was so close in the 2019 session until in a special election, we lost the Senate seat held by Senator Lowry, and the Republican majority increased their numbers. The legislation to include it now has to start over with the 2021 session. I'm wondering if you are willing to carry on Dick's work and move this forward.
Yes, Joan, absolutely. If someone else hasn't already laid claim to the work. But if there is another author already lined up, then I'm going to join them in the effort. It's a funny thing. Earlier in my tenure in the House, someone offered or asked me to carry that legislation in the House. And I remember Senator Cohens reaching out and saying, you know, I'm already doing this work in the Senate, so maybe somebody from a different part of the state should carry the legislation in the House. And I deferred, but it's something that is really important to me. It's important to who we are as Americans. And you know, I could go on and on about the moment that we're in and the Supreme Court that we might have, but it is not right that we are not reflected as women in the Constitution, and it's time that we are. And so, yeah, I am committed to that work in whatever capacity I show up in. I will carry on Senator Cohen's important legacy on that and so many things.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
then I have a second question. If stop me, Marty, if it's been asked. You have been collecting people's health stories with your Our Stories, Our Health project. Yeah. I'm wondering what you have learned that you will use regarding healthcare legislation if you are elected to the Senate.
So thank you for asking that good question, Joan. And I have learned, unfortunately, that there are countless stories of Minnesotans who have struggled to use our convoluted health system to get the care that they need. And I think COVID has made all of us the story. It's not just a series of stories anymore. We are all experiencing a health system, if you can call it a system at all, that doesn't have the apparatus in place, the infrastructure, the public health infrastructure to actually marshal what we need to care for all of us in this moment. So I'm going to carry with me the idea, right? The painful idea that lots of people have shared their stories with me. And those stories, you know, fuel me and they fuel my work. The part that's been hard, Joan, is the recognition when people hear those stories, is they draw the conclusion, well, yeah, that's what I already know about our health system. So it has not been a catalyst yet for change. And that's the work that I have to do in my work with Our Stories. But learning that more Minnesotans than not hear a hard story like that, they feel the compassion about it, but they also draw the conclusion quickly that the healthcare system doesn't work very well for people. And those stories just reinforce that hard ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we know if the Supreme Court rules against the healthcare, what that's going to mean for Minnesotans. I don't think we have an idea yet.
No, I think the threat of losing coverage for so many people through medical assistance and the very real threat of losing, if the ACA is struck down, then the prohibition on denying people care because of a pre-existing condition goes away. And when you think the fact that there are 7 million people in America infected with COVID, and we don't know the long-term
Right?
ramifications of that infection, all those people would be subject to that pre-existing condition. That's ridiculous. That's not a health system. That's a profit system, and it needs change. It needs wholesale change.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
Erica, I saw you waving your hand there. Do you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yes, I do. Hi, Erin. So mine is kind of more a topic of discussion slash just asking what your viewpoints are. So our intern group read this book, Food Fix, and at St. Kate's. And so in terms of thinking about healthcare and upstream thinking and preventative care in nursing, like looking at diabetes and heart disease, this book talked about SNAP benefits. And I don't know if you have worked with SNAP benefits, but currently there are $7 billion of SNAP benefits spent on sugary beverages, and 75% of food is purchased, that is purchased through SNAP is like ultra processed. So just thinking about healthcare and how much could be prevented of people ending up in hospitals with heart disease and obesity. What are your thoughts on how that could be changed, especially with Minnesota people?
It's a great question, and I'm not familiar with the book, but I do know what I'm familiar with the subject matter that you're describing. It is the case for me that health is a construct much broader than needing to go to the hospital when we're sick, and it has always been that way for me. And I tie my support for health care for everybody to the part of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that talk about our freedom and our ability to lead a full and happy life. And what we eat and how we access that food is critical to our health. Well aware of SNAP, aware of efforts to try and improve the nutritional value of the food, and to create the conditions so we can access more of that locally. And I think that's right. I think there's an important nexus between locally grown food, healthy food, health, and climate change. And we're, running up hard against the supply chains that are already in place. A good example of that for me is I visited a farm out in Western Minnesota near Alec, Minnesota a couple of years ago. And this family had a pretty large farm, and they had built a commercial kitchen so that they could clean and distribute what they were growing, both in farmers markets, but also to the local grocery store. And they thought their biggest problem would be being able to grow enough of what the store needed to meet their demand, so they would consider them a reliable producer. But instead, the biggest problem was that once they had created the relationship with the grocer, that was a part of a larger corporate chain. The corporate chain shut down the relationship between the local producer and that grocery store, because they wanted to be able to ship into that community the products that they were, contracting with producers from other parts of the country. They wanted to hold on to their supply chain. So while it seems like the easy fix for us is to make sure that people have access to the land, that they can grow and sell their produce and their food locally. And I think there's a huge appetite for that here in Minnesota, both when you think about local restaurants, but just the way that we're leading our lives. There are strong commercial forces. There are strong corporate forces that are going to work against that. And that's where I think we need to do our work. When I think about making structural change, that's where we need to make the structural change. It's like in the Farm Bill federally, to loosen up some of that regulation so that we can think and grow and produce locally, because that local production is going to be healthier for people. It's going to be fresh and it's going to be accessible. And I think that's how we get to the place that I think you're describing in terms of health as a result of a healthy lifestyle.
Anyone else have a question?
I just wanted to add one line that we read in the book that has stuck with me, and it's that food is medicine. So I think you can probably relate to that on a nursing perspective, that it's just so important. So thank you for that answer.
You're welcome. Thank you. And if you have it after this, right, if any of you have thoughts, feedback, advice, pushback, email me or call me. And Joan has my contact information. I am very, very serious about wanting to work with, to lead with the people of Minnesota and with all of you.
Erica, could you mention the name of that book again? I'd like to read it.
It's Food Fix
Food
by,
Fix.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anne, did you have a question?
Yeah, I feel like I'm familiar, Erin. Thanks for joining us with the issues that you care about. I'm wondering if you'd just be willing to comment on, we know that there's huge racial disparities in housing and employment and education and so many things. And those are just going to be exacerbated, magnified by what's going on with the pandemic. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are when you look at how we address some of those racial challenges, what you would see as the ones at the top of your list as you move into a Senate seat.
Thanks for the question. I was committed in the statewide race to talk about the racial disparities in Minnesota wherever I went. And they're well documented in Minnesota. So in housing, in health, in criminal justice and policing, in education, and now, COVID, real life experience in this moment, we have disparate outcomes for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. And I am happy to report, as I talked about that in different parts of the state, I got a very positive reaction. Once in a while, people would question the statistics because we really are at the top of most of the lists, like in a bad way. We are in we're not in what we would consider our Minnesota tradition of leading. We're not leading on the question of racial disparities. We're way behind. So I think with each of those segments, if you think about each issue as an issue unto itself, there is work to do. I think representation is really important. So teachers of color, more healthcare providers of color, we're hearing more people say they want to go see a provider that is from their own ethnicity or their own race. And we don't have enough teachers of color. We don't have enough nurses of color. But I think the core work that we have to do as a people in Minnesota is get our heads wrapped around our privilege, around what white supremacy really means, to embed in ourselves the realization of the birth of this country, the legacy of enslaved people from the beginning, and how that has been repeated in the laws that have been in place for a long time, and reconcile with that ourselves. And until we really, I think, come to terms with our history and where we sit right now, we're going to have a real struggle in moving forward together in the direction of inclusivity for everybody. There's a woman that doesn't live too far from me, and we have spent a lot of time together in the last couple of years, and especially in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And, I was talking with her about this question and wanting to talk about race and class and gender. And, I have a particular bent on gender, especially having come out of that governor's race, and thinking we need to tackle all these versions, all these iterations of oppression together. And we have the capacity to do that. And she said, I think that will be hard until we actually wrestle with the repair that we need to do, that we need to talk through reparations. What does that mean? What does that look like? I won't feel safe. I won't feel like I'm on a path to liberation until we have that hard conversation. And I am willing to use my voice in this platform to be a participant, an ally, an accomplice in doing that work, because I believe, as I have talked with Minnesotans, that more of us want to do that work. It's hard, I think, for those of us who are white to figure out how to be a part of that without, some people are hesitant. They don't want to make a mistake, and I certainly appreciate that. But I did, in my tenure in the House, serve with a growing number of people who come from and built the Posse Caucus. So more people of color and Indigenous people who have made up that caucus now. And what I watched happen in our House DFL caucus as we grew more diverse is we got way better at talking about how to amend and fix the disparities that we're living with, because people with their own lived experience were talking in the center of that discussion about their experiences and bringing different solutions to the problem in a way that we could advance together. And I think the representation piece is important. I think wrestling with and dealing with the legacy of this country is important. And making way for other people, that's important. So not always being at the front of the discussion, but being a partner to, stepping back so others with a different lived experience can share their experience so we can build together. It's a really tough issue. I'm going to continue to work to do my part, recognizing that I won't be able to find the solutions on my own.
Clara, would you be willing to ask your question in the chat for the people in the village as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I mentioned I'm a social work and public health student, and I have a specific interest in healthcare policy. So that's why I'm asking this question. I know that putting people's healthcare in their own hands is important to you. And I'm curious how you would potentially do that by expanding M-Insure, Medicaid, or Medicaid, Medicare, any of those state insurances or national insurances, just because many providers do not accept this type of payment.
So we absolutely need to move beyond the construct that we have right now in healthcare. Most of my career working in healthcare policy has been about advancing coverage. When Minnesota Care was first passed in the early 1990s, there was structural change embedded in that law, and most of it was repealed over time. And what is left really is just a state coverage program, which is awesome, because we need to make sure everybody has coverage in the current model. But I think that it's time for us to explore separating healthcare coverage and healthcare from our employers, and move to a publicly financed, accountable to the people model that serves us. And I think it is possible for us to do right here in Minnesota. But right now, we don't really have a public healthcare system that is built to serve us. We have sectors. We have the long-term care industry, and we have assisted living, and we have a sector that is built to care for people who have intellectual or physical disabilities. We have an acute care system, if you have to go to the hospital. But all of those things sort of operate separate from one another. They're funded differently. And there's no one place, not our employers, not our hospitals, not our clinics, and there are good people there, but no one place that says our responsibility is the health of everybody. And so it creates all sorts of gaps, and that's where people fall. And especially it is the people who are sick, because the system isn't built, and you don't make a lot of money off of caring for somebody with a chronic condition, chronic mental illness, chronic chemical dependency, chronic diabetes, right? The money is made off of fixing somebody's heart, or a quick surgery, not necessarily quick when you go through a hip replacement, but that's where the money is. And so really to make a structural change is going to mean more than expanding coverage in Minnesota Care, which I support. It does mean altering significantly the way that people are accessing their coverage. And I think there is a pathway for us to do that in the states, and I'm going to continue to work on that. It's something I laid out when I was running for governor. But I do agree with the statement that you made. The healthcare should be in our hands, and the relationship between us and our providers should be the central point of the healthcare delivery system, and it's not right now.
Erin, I was wondering, we've met with you when you were in the House about immigration issues and how it impacts the lives of real Minnesotans. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you're aware, but many of our student interns and our St. Joseph worker this year are working on a relatively new initiative here. The St. Cade students have started a food shelf to meet the growing needs of students. And recently they expanded the food shelf to not simply serve themselves, students, but to expand it to the needs of the clients and patients of the St. Mary's Health Clinics, which I'm hoping you're familiar with, but it's a very marginalized community right here in our own backyard. And we've seen tremendous need in terms of food needs. And students, feel free to jump in and share as well, or our St. Joseph worker. But my question is, we oftentimes think of immigration as being this national issue. What hopes do you have for serving a marginalized immigrant community in Minnesota and the tremendous needs right now, given COVID? Many of them are frontline workers. What's your hopes if you're elected to the Senate to help this community?
I will say that for a long time as a state policymaker, I adhered to the rule, if you will, that immigration is a federal issue. And in order to make a system that isn't a patchwork, that we should yield to federal policymaking to fix the system. And it's not happening. And we can't keep waiting from my perspective. And while I'm not, enamored with the idea of a patchwork when it comes to the lives of people, I do believe that for the people who have decided that Minnesota is their home, that we need to make sure that they have access to healthcare, a driver's license, a safe place to live, protection in the workplace, access to childcare, just like everybody else. And our laws don't always see immigrants in the same way. They're outside of the system and outside of the protections of the law and the system in some cases. And that we just can't afford to do that anymore in Minnesota and not in America. We are wasting and hurting people. And so in whatever way I can, Marty, I'm going to work with the community to make sure and not be afraid anymore of extending the benefits that should already be in place and to the people who have come from other places and have chosen Minnesota as their home. It is what we do. It is how we build our future. Our future rests. It always has been about change, about people deciding to come and bringing their own gifts, their own skills, and digging in and being a part of what it means to be a Minnesotan. And that door is wide open for me. And the work and the lives of the people who are joining us are as important to me as somebody who descended from a first person here. So I'm in. There was a second part to your question, and that is about hunger. I have a good friend who is now the CEO at Second Harvest Heartland, Allison O'Toole, and she has been sounding the alarm about the level of hunger that we will experience here in Minnesota and across the country because of the pandemic and because so many people are out of work. And she has been working tirelessly raising money to try and fill that gap. But we're coming up short from the vantage point of the federal government and their largesse and their ability to fill that gap. And so as we're heading into the fall and into the winter, I think we're going to see, like we haven't seen in our lifetimes, the experience with hunger here in the state of Minnesota. So I want to thank the students who are so ahead of that curve and are extending the work of a food bank to others. If you ever want to connect with Second Harvest Heartland and the work that they're doing there, I would love to make that possible. If you're interested, I don't know if that is of interest to you, but when we talk about fresh and healthy food, when we talk about abundant food, and we talk about hungry bellies, the work that you're doing, the work that they are doing line up completely. And nobody should go hungry in America, one of the richest countries in the entire world. And they are.
I have a question. So we have been hearing a lot of talk about law and order, which, you know, tends to be a racist dog whistle in a lot of ways. And so the question of criminal justice and policing has been on the forefront of many people's minds for a long time now, and it's really in our political consciousness. So knowing that policing as a system was started directly to keep control over Black folks, are you for reform, or are you for finding a new way to police, or finding a new way community policing?
I have always been interested in what I guess we're thinking about now in terms of new way. You know, first and foremost, we are having 2 discussions in Minnesota around this question of law and order. There is the political discussion. I am talking with a lot of other candidates who are running all over the state of Minnesota right now, and they are being pummeled by mail coming from outside groups about law and order and injecting that issue into campaigns across the state of Minnesota as a way to divide us, right? Same thing we were talking about before. It makes it really difficult to have the conversation that we need to have, which is what is the right and proper role for a peace force, for community policing, for the law enforcement that we have in our communities right now. I have a friend who is leaving her work with Angela Connolly in the next couple of weeks. And she spent a lot of time on the ground in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and reached out to me on a Friday afternoon because there was somebody near the memorial who was in the midst of a mental health breakdown. And the only way that they could get help to this person was to call the police. And we already know, and we've known for years about the sometimes lethal outcome of interaction between people who are in a mental health crisis and law enforcement, in part because that's not the work of law enforcement, right? And we have decided often, if it is a person who's not sleeping in the place where we're expecting them to sleep, if someone is having an issue with chemical dependency, vagrancy, of mental illness, that we call the police. It's our first line. And they're not prepared necessarily to interact there. Instead, we should have people like Clara and others prepared to go into the streets and look out for people and bring them into where they need to get the care that they need. So transformative in terms of, let us think about the work of law enforcement more narrowly and use some of the resources that have been going to law enforcement and policing into the human services spaces that will support people in the ways that they need help and get them the help that they need. I, like many people, really shifted my thinking around law enforcement in the wake of the shooting of Jamar Clark, the Philando Castile, Thurman Blevins, and now most recently in the murder of George Floyd. The use of deadly force, that standard needs to change because it does give law enforcement a lot of immunity to prosecution. We've also highly militarized our police forces on purpose. I think there's been surplus military equipment that has gone to law enforcement agencies. And so when we see now peaceful protests lined up against a SWAT team, it inevitably incites trouble rather than keeps the peace. And we need to move back to the direction of keeping the peace. So I was pleased with the start of the work that happened, that emerged out of the Posse Caucus that became law, but it is just a start. And almost everybody in that Posse Caucus will say that. I understand that we all want to feel safe in our communities, and we should. We deserve that. We deserve that. And that means for some in our communities, law enforcement needs to change because they don't feel safe in the presence of law enforcement. And that's a problem. And it's something we need to address. And I have to say, law enforcement's fighting pretty hard. And, you know, so we're going to have to be in our big girl pants, as we say, and make sure that we are building a community that's safe for everybody, all of us.
So Erin, as we're moving up at the end of our hour, we again just want to give you our sincere thanks for trying something new via Zoom and finding ways to continue these circle conversations. But we don't want to end without the opportunity to ask you rather bluntly, this is an election year, you are a candidate for the Senate. Why should we vote for you, and what's your hopes in the coming year if you're elected?
I hope to earn your vote, and thank you for having me in the circle conversation. I hope to earn your vote because you see in me someone who is ready to build a future that includes all of us in Minnesota, a person willing to do the actual work, the hard work, to make progress on the toughest issues that we face. And I hope that you see someone who understands that hope is more powerful than fear, and that there is more that unites us than divides us. And that's not a slogan, but a practice of my politics. And this next chapter for me is about bringing that to life. I hope that you are as excited as I am for this election. And I say that knowing I carry a pretty big bucket of fear inside of me if the election doesn't go in the way that we need it to go. But I turn that fear into action. And for me, that means voting. And I hope that you are all prepared to vote safely, whether it is voting early by mail, voting early in person, getting your mail ballot and taking it to a drop-off spot, or voting on election day with your mask on. We all need to get our ballots in as early as we can because we know that this president is already claiming that the ways that we vote are illegitimate. And if your ballot is in on election day, and you can track it if you vote by mail through the Secretary of State's office, it will be counted on election day. Our last step together is not the election. It is one step. We have work to do beyond that, and I invite you to join me, and I hope that you'll see me as someone you want to invite to join you so that we are working together to build a future powerfully for everybody in the state of Minnesota. So vote, celebrate, knock on wood, get a little rest, and then let's come back together again and start talking about our next installment of the work that we're going to do to build Minnesota's future. Thank you very much for having me. And Joan Whitman, thank you for organizing this lovely meeting. I just wish we were having lunch together, but we'll do that again in the future too.
Well, again, thank you, Erin, and thank everyone for joining us today. Simple, ruthless plug. I know, Erin, you have been here before, but on the morning of October 23rd, together with some students from St. Kate's, we're going to have a morning Zoom coffee hour where we're going to look at the healthcare system and the impacts of inequity that is highlighted through the COVID crisis. So it'll be a morning Zoom meeting on Friday, October 23rd. Erin, you're welcome to join us, and students, I know some of you are helping to present in that, so thank you. But more than anything, thank you for continuing the circle conversations and these frank conversations we need to have.
Thank you,
that,
everybody.
Have a blessed day, everyone, and good luck, Erin, in the campaign ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.